Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Business Owners Strategy Forum that we've put together at Prime to fundamentally help our clients and each other get through what's known as a pretty difficult time in this particular perspective. Today really is a forum, and the format of the day really, or the period that we've got together, is that I'm going to talk to you guys about sort of some of the things that we've done and observed in the market with our business owners, because predominantly what we want to do is share, and then that'll probably go for about 20 minutes or so, and then after that I'd like to open it up for people to discuss their concerns and issues and observations and any information that we've got. So that's fundamentally the way that we're going to go forward. And what I'll do is I will share some screens with you in terms of just some slides that I've got, just so you don't have to continually look at my face all the time. But at least there you've got another visual prompt, but we'll kick in and kick out of that. So I'm just going to get into that. For those that don't know me, basically I'm the managing partner of Prime Accounting and Business Advisory. We are a multidisciplinary accounting firm, as you know, because you're all clients of ours, but just in terms of knowing me personally. I've been running accounting and advisory firms for probably the best part of 20 years and helping I've probably looked after over 1,000 businesses in terms of helping them achieve their aspirations and goals and dreams in terms of the reasons why they went in business in the first place. So fundamentally, we're here to support you guys in your quest to run better businesses and achieve your dreams and aspirations, which is fundamentally why we exist. And so that sort of leads us on to why did I sort of want to put this forum together? And we've had a tremendous take up on this because, we are in uncertain times, and we sent an email out yesterday sort of inviting for this particular forum as a starting post for really the whole principle of this is to connect, to share, to support, strategize and implement, because, we need to support each other. I believe that, the business owners are a community of people, and we should be there to help each other out. And that's the reason why I wanted to put this particular forum together. And we'll explain really what I would really ultimately like to do, which is connect us all together as well in terms of continually share information, because it's been really amazing for me over the last week or so in terms of having the privileged position of connecting with a lot of you that are online today, but also many others that I haven't had a chance to speak to, just about fears, concerns, observations, but just some of the creativity, some of the sharing that's going on has just been phenomenal, and it's really given me a huge amount of delight and confidence around that we do have such a wonderful community, and especially at Prime. And so that was the motivation for me to really, extend it out so everybody can get the benefit of that in a online, real-time sort of type sense. So that's fundamentally what we're doing. So what's going on? Well, this is probably the biggest unknown for us, is that we just don't know what this coronavirus impact is going to have on our businesses, on our health, on our lives. And so we're in very much uncertain terms and uncharted territory and uncharted waters. And really what I'm also concerned about is fundamentally the uncertainty drives a lot of anxiety, and anxiety drives a lot of stress. Stress drives a lot of mental health. Really, we're seeing this is some of the impact that the coronavirus is actually having immediately, and just the fear and concern around that. Now, that's not for everybody. Some people might be actually benefiting from this particular scenario in terms of their business models and may not be impacted upon it at all, but I'm sure that in some aspect they are being impacted, whether that's actually having enough toilet paper too for some of us as well. So really, we are being impacted. It's just the levels in which we've been impacted. But, in business, I'm sure that there's elements of everything that we're doing right now that's impacted, and especially down to, protecting our people. And we're going to talk about that today. So I'm going to spend probably the next period of time just talking about some of the really good stuff that's going on, some of the learnings that we're getting, some of the sharing of information that's happening, because really that's the stuff that's going to help us through this uncertain time. So really, we're here to support each other is fundamentally what I'm really advocating for. So what do we do in uncertain times? Because if uncertainty is driving us at the moment, and there's a lot of fear, and I'm having lots of conversations with business owners at the moment, start off with, I just don't know, I'm really worried, I'm concerned, I don't know what to do next, and that sort of type stuff, and some of it's driven off poor or bad information. So what I want to do is really take you through a bit of a process, and the process that I've been taking many of my clients through at the moment around how do we deal with this. And so a lot of this stuff is logical. A lot of it you've probably already done in your business. You know, we're all pretty smart, intelligent people, and that's the reason why I've got this forum together as well, because, you know, we're all going to be able to share and benefit from each other's knowledge in this. I'm not the only person that has this insight and knowledge because of the position that I play, but we all have knowledge and insight, and we're better off to get it from intelligent people that are part of our community rather than probably the information or misinformation that's going around in the marketplace. So I've put together a bit of a list of things that I want to cover off on today's conversation before we open it up to everybody, is that, you know, talking about people first, you know, that's been our focus in our business at Prime, is to make sure that we are putting our team and our people first in terms of protecting them from, you know, any adverse consequences that may arise from the coronavirus. But I have put there looking after yourself and your team. It's really, really important that we also look after ourselves and our own energy at this particular point in time, because we are leaders and we are leaders in our businesses. And so from that perspective, you know, we need to also protect ourselves and our energy and our stress levels and our levels of anxiety. And that's hopefully going to be the case by, you know, being part of this particular community as well. And so, you know, we're actively giving people tips and around how they should be doing that in terms of protection of themselves, but also their team. And we'll talk about that today in terms of some of the things that we've put in place for our team that seem to have worked really, really well. Gather data. I can't stress this enough. Right now, a lot of people, you know, when you're in uncertain times, data is a really important thing to think about, because we're making decisions, when you're in uncertain times, making decisions off poor data typically. And at the moment, we actually don't have a lot of data to be able to then make informed decisions, but we do have sufficient amount of data in our own businesses that we can be looking at. So, you know, this is a really, really strong time to know your numbers, know your financial position, know what's going on in your business. And that leads on to cash flow planning. I mean, cash is the lifeblood of the business. We know that cash is king. We need to know how much, what I call runway, we actually have, because really ultimately we need to think about making pretty significant decisions in some of our businesses. But we don't want to make them before we have as much data as possible. So therefore, it's really important to know how much cash reserves you have to then determine what your plan is around even making decisions in the first place. And then we obviously need to strategize and scenario planning. Some of the creativity that I've seen from business owners in terms of turning some pretty dire, difficult situations into some positive ones has been, you know, it's an amazing thing, and just goes to show you the resilience of people in these particular scenarios. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. Staying connected and communicate. Once again, can't stress this enough. We're going to be in an isolation sort of type period for a period of time in terms of just working from home, and we're going to talk about some of the, you know, the virtual world and tips and tricks that we've got in relation to that as well. And the last one is protection of assets. Now, assets in all forms, our people are our assets, but also we're now going to be a lot more vulnerable in terms of security of IT especially, so we'll discuss a little bit about that as well. So they're the topics that we're going to cover off on today's conversation, but these are the ones that will be constantly spoken about for the period of time that we'll need to be discussing it. But fundamentally, these topics are topics that we should be thinking about all the time in our businesses. So all it does is just heighten in these particular circumstances and time. So we need a plan around cash flow, people, clients and customers, suppliers and IT. So it's something that we need to make sure that we're covering each particular element of this, because then we can actually make sure that we've got some structure and discipline. Because when you get into times where there's heightened uncertainty and overwhelmness, you can forget stuff, or stuff can fall through the cracks. So that's really important to make sure that we're covering each one of these particular areas. Can't also stress this enough. This is leadership. We are leaders in our business. We are leaders in our community. I can't stress enough in terms of these are the times that we've actually been probably training for most of our lives in business and also in our communities and as leaders. Really, when you think about really critical times, and people that have been around long enough said that what they're feeling at the moment, experiences like, going into war sort of type thing, and I know that, we don't want to necessarily draw parallels between war and other things because of the impact that it has, but it has this energy, or it has this feel, and this is what people who have lived through it have actually saying to us. And so that's really interesting. And if I think about the history of that and think about what people need at this particular point in time when you go through that, I sort of cast my mind back to, I run leadership training, and one of the iconic stories that I talk about in leadership training is around, the 9/11, impact. And I studied Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York at that particular point in time, and just what he actually did. And really the lessons from that scenario was that you can imagine the chaos that would have been around at that particular point in time. And what people are looking for is that they're looking for, looking for comfort, they're looking for guidance, they're looking for, direction. And that's what we can provide them. So we need to make sure that we're stepping up for that and holding ourselves out to being these people that do have the capacity and the capability really of leading our people to, a new world. Really, we're seeing, I believe fundamentally that there'll be some big things that come out of this from a positive perspective on how we actually continue to operate as individuals and as business leaders and business owners post coronavirus. So that's just something that, I think it's important to stress that we do have the opportunity really to step up. And, that comes back into my philosophy that, the small business community in this country represents 47% of the GDP of this nation. We are so important to the future of this particular country. And so I know that we all feel like we're only playing a tiny part in this, but collectively together, I think we can do some pretty amazing stuff. And that's what gives me a lot of excitement and confidence around even just having these conversations. So let's move on to some practical stuff in terms of, things that we've been currently doing and things that I know that our clients are currently doing at the moment around our people. Once again, I'm sure that everybody's doing lots of these particular things, but, we also, it's good to learn from other people's point of view. So the first point that I want to make about that is, we need to, first and foremost, protect and keep safe, the most important people in our organisations, which are ourselves and our team. And that's hugely important. So obviously a lot of people have deployed their staff where they can to working from home. Now, that is something that will present massive challenges for some organisations that aren't really ready or set up for this particular thing. We fortunately have been in the position in our organisations where we're able to deploy our team pretty quickly. We've got 100 staff Australia-wide. And we've done that because we've got pretty strong IT infrastructure to support that, because we've always had a working from home policy for the last sort of 12 or 13 years, which has been wonderful. But there's a lot of people that aren't in that particular situation. So what we're going to do is share some of the things that we've done to people that need that to help them along and get up to speed quickly in regards to that. So making sure that the team have got the right equipment, that they can actually work efficiently and functionally from home in a safe environment for them, that are, you know, we've got to still also consider the OH&S principles that we have in our own offices for our team that are actually at home. So, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, communication platforms are there. One of the biggest things that I personally find, if I work from home too many days in a row, and I've actually been at home every day this week, so I haven't been in the office at all. So is the isolation factor. And we're going to talk about that a bit today, and making sure that we continually look after our teams and keep them connected and keep us all connected together. Because I personally, you know, I'm already feeling it at the moment in terms of being in my office at home, which is a lovely environment, and I'm, you know, enjoy being here. But there is a completely different energy. I was talking to one of my colleagues about this, saying it just feels differently, and we discussed the energy, the difference between being in an office and being at home, because home has got a completely different energy to the office, and so we just have to be mindful of that. We need to obviously provide a lot of guidance and toolkits for our team to ensure that they actually are able to know what to do and what not to do, even down to little things that I've sort of been really strong in this particular regard around. Nowadays, I don't want any phone calls, voice-only phone calls. I want to make sure that, you know, we use our visual tools like Zoom that we're on at the moment, like Skype for Business or Skype, because, you know, just the face-to-face contact is helps a long way in terms of that isolation. So helping people sort of even deal with that and deal with how to use cameras properly and backgrounds and sort of feeling like I'm a bit of a dad sometimes in relation to that sort of type stuff. But they need that guidance down to that particular level. It's amazing to think that you have got it all covered, and then the smallest little thing you go, wow, I missed that bit. So this is about the sharing bit. So the people piece is really, really important, and the IT infrastructure around that's important too. So we've made sure that we've got, it's mandatory now that every one of our team members has Skype for Business open, a tool that we've got called Workplace, which is Facebook for work. Okay, so it's basically a lockdown version of Facebook that we use as an internal communication platform and sharing platform, which we're going to talk a bit about today, and possibly using that channel for us to all collaborate and talk with each other in a business community sense. You know, that's a wonderful place to share information as well, and also stay connected. And so also Zoom, you know, is really important to be part of that too. So we do have, and obviously email. So we've got communication platforms that are mandatory now that people actually have to engage with, because we're in a new world, we're in uncharted territory. So we just have to make sure that we're using, I suppose, the virtual world for good rather than evil. Gather data. This is something that, you know, I've spent a lot of time speaking about this particular week, that, you know, there is a fear, there is an anxiety that's coming out in all of us right now. We're hearing things, we're listening to things, we're getting sources of news from multiple different angles, and we really have to be careful about the sources of news that we're getting. I know it's obvious, we're all pretty educated people at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, sometimes we can still be caught up with something, you're hearing something from a source. I was talking to one client the other day, and you know, there was a level of anxiety there, and we're able to get some clarity for her after a period of time. And then she said, it's all right now until I go back to watching Twitter. I said, well, that's a good example. Just don't do it. Don't watch Twitter. Go to government websites, go to health websites, you know, get your source from people that you actually trust and respect and know that they're leaders in the community. I know it goes without saying, but it's amazing, and I get sucked into it as well sometimes. So really, really think about the source of news that you're getting, because that will actually give you a sense of knowledge and data. Even down to when I was watching the PM's address the other day, and thinking about as a father, you know, I've got 3 children, and 2 are which are at school and one's at university, and one's at primary and one's at secondary, and I didn't know what was going to happen. We just assumed that all the schools were going to go into lockdown. Now, at the moment, some schools have, but some schools haven't. The government has said that at this stage there's no requirement, because their data suggests that only 2.4% of the population in China actually got coronavirus. So they're actually thinking that because there's an immunity or somehow with children. So therefore, that gives us a sense of, well, I don't have to think about that because my children hopefully will continue to go to school. So that doesn't impact upon me sitting in my home office, for example. So just little things like that and sharing knowledge. Assess your financial position. That's something that we do know. Knowing your data and knowing information right now is key and critical. And even though there's some businesses that know their data right now, I think we really need to question every element of our data and really know our financial position, because that will then give us an indication of how the time frame in which to make decisions. And that's really important as well. So we're not doing panic decisions, we're actually doing methodical, informed decisions based on data. When you don't know, don't assume. There's a lot of people assuming a lot of things at the moment, and it's good to scenario plan and hypothesize and test things, but really fundamentally, if you don't know, don't assume. Actually try and gather as much data as you possibly can. And that's, even down to things like speak to your customers, talk to them about what they're feeling, speak to your colleagues and your competitors, and speak to anyone that you possibly can to validate or dispel some of the theories that you might be coming up or might be hearing. This is the best way for us to sort of act in this regard. And obviously gather data. I'm hearing lots of different things at the moment from banks, what the banks are doing and what the ATO are doing in terms of leniency around policy for repayment of debt. And so from that point of view, the banks, I found out the other day, he had a conversation with the ANZ Bank, and they seem to have laxed, given everybody a 3-month holiday on their principal and interest. Now, they haven't there's not a lot of written documentations coming out because we're all flying by the seat of our pants at the moment. But really, if you haven't already spoken to your bank, do so to find out what their response is to the coronavirus. The ATO are also starting to come out with some, obviously the government had a stimulus package that they announced last week, which we sent a note out to. But even this week, they started to talk about their collection policy around how they're going to deal with collection of tax debt. So we're starting to see more and more of this information coming out, but unless we share it, we don't know about that. So that's what this forum's all about. So gather data to be able to make decisions. Cash flow runway. I've been looking at balance sheets of people all week this week, and I've been looking for indicators to work out what their current, I call it runway, in terms of a plane taking off. I've always spoken about cash flow as runway. How much runway do you have for a plane to actually take off or end the runway and crash? So hopefully that's not the case. So knowing what our cash reserves are, because there's just this fear about, I don't know what's going to happen. So what happens for us is that we start to make decisions. But really, we should probably just stop and pause for a second, look at our current scenario to say, do we have to make a decision today about this particular issue? And generally, cash reserves will give you that, indication as to whether you need to make a decision today or tomorrow or next week or not, based on what your cash position is. And really, every day that goes on, the more data we can gather and more data we can collect, which means we'll make better decisions. And right now, reforecasting is one of the biggest things that we can do. We've obviously got budget forecasts, cash flow forecasts, all that sort of type stuff. It's now time to have a look at those in light of what's actually going on, so we can determine these are the practical elements of what you should be doing as a responsible business owner right now, and not just leaping to worst case scenario. So scenario planning, this is the next thing. Okay, scenario planning, first of all, we need to go and get a crystal ball, which we know doesn't exist, unfortunately. If it did, then we'd all be pretty comfortable right now. So that's usually the response when I talk to people about scenario planning. They say, I don't have a crystal ball. We don't, okay? But we do have data and information, which we just spoke about, and we do know what our plans have been historically about what the next, say, 3, 6, 12 months looks like. So we need to then look at that strategy and then see if that strategy still actually exists today and still can continue on. Because a lot of the time it actually can be. that the world may not change for some of us. It may change dramatically for some of us. I know, and there's a lot of businesses that, they have to re-strategize immediately because, the time is now. But one of the things about strategy is be creative. There's always solutions to problems most of the time, and I know that some people that are sitting online may feel a bit like that may not necessarily be the case, but the best way to be creative is probably going back to my earlier point today, which is about looking after yourself and, making sure that you're okay. Because if you're in a highly stressed, vulnerable position where you're struggling and you're in an overwhelm, it's a very difficult place for you to be creative. Really, when you need to be creative, you need to be in a reasonably, I suppose, calm state. Okay, so do whatever you can do to release some of that sort of type stuff. So that's something else that I think is really important for you guys to think about as well. But I've got to tell you that some of the strategy that I've seen coming out from people has been quite extraordinary in terms of just looking at a problem in a different way and working out whether they need to pivot or change or reinvent or recreate themselves. Seeing some great stuff, which I think it'd be good to share as well. So that's something else. Next point is, why part of the reason why we're having this particular discussion today and session today is staying connected and communicating. As I said before, isolation will be a big thing for us, and especially working from home and being isolated away from each other in a real sense. So the virtual world that has been created by our IT gurus is really great. So, we often see that IT sometimes can be used for evil. In this regard, I think it's used for good. It's a great platform. Zoom, Skype, Workplace, all of these tools that we've got in our WebEx, all these tools that we've got now with our fingertips is just fantastic for us to make sure that we stay connected and communicate, because, once again, isolation also creates mental health issues as well, and we need to be there to support and protect our people and ourselves. So I can't emphasise that enough in terms of these things. And these are the things that we've been putting in place for our team, down to even things like, I'll have a daily huddle with my team, and I'll do it via Zoom, and I'll be able to see, 40 faces on my screen of my team, it's such a great feeling for me to know that, that we're all connected and we're all still operating the same way that we otherwise would operate. And in some regards, I feel more connected because I'm sort of, we're forced via the structures that we put in place to actually, ensure that we continue to communicate. So it's a really good thing. There's some really positive things that are coming out of this particular environment. I know there's some horrible stuff, and there's a lot of people that are highly vulnerable, but we've got to look for the positive in some of this stuff as well. Now, just the last point that I really want to make in terms of things that we should be thinking about at this particular point in time, so we don't miss anything, is about security, and especially IT. Now, with IT security, is that that's a quote from my CTO, my Chief Technology Officer at Prime. Hackers don't break in, they log in. So you can see that I put the comma in the wrong spot. That's because of the fact I'm doing all this stuff on the fly as we go, because that's what we're doing right now. Today, we talk about the fact that we're building the plane while we fly it, because we're actually having to move quickly on the fly. And one of those things was that, we sent an email out to you guys less than 24 hours ago, and we've got, over 60 people that have signed into this particular session, which just goes to show you the speed in which we can act if we need to. And so that's fantastic. So just in terms of IT security, that's other things that we'll share with you guys too, is some of the things that we've got to ensure that we're making, we're securing our environments, because as we deploy our teams off-site, it can actually create vulnerability in terms of our IT infrastructure and systems. And so this is something that we have to also be very, very conscious about in terms of the vulnerability of our our IT infrastructure when we're no longer mostly in the office. So that's the particular point that I want to raise there. What I also wanted to talk to you guys about today, and interested in your feedback, and we'll open up for questions in a minute, and also comments and observations, because this is a forum, is that I'd like to actually keep this going. I'd like to actually create a forum of business owners as a community for us to share. And so I would like to continue to have, a weekly call like this, where we can actually discuss, stay connected, share all the things we spoke, strategize, implement, because I think it'd be good from that point of view. And also create a space where we can actually physically share documents and physically share information and knowledge and good news stories and issues and problems and stuff like that. And so I'm also going to, if it's appropriate and everybody's comfortable with this, invite everybody, if they'd like to be, to a workplace site, which is a channel where we can actually do all those particular things. It's safe and secure, and we're a publicly listed company, and so we've got a chief technology officer, so you can imagine how important it is for us to have great IT security. So we don't actually advocate or do anything on the IT world and platform unless it's actually highly secure. So this would be a very highly secure place for us to communicate. So I'd really like to create, a community where we're all sharing and getting through this together, because that would give me, a sense of purpose from that point of view as well. So I'm really wanting to do this from that point of view. Just quickly, before we open it up, is that I do get a sense that we are entering a new world, and this is a new world about sustainable business, because I kind of feel that there's business was going in direction, and mental health was going in direction where there's a lot of stress in business and business owners and our teams and the world. And I think that this might actually help us recalibrate that to work in a more sustainable world. So let's look for the positive in this sort of type stuff as well. And let's look to see how this could possibly, how we can bridge off this for us to have better lives, because that's fundamentally why we're going to business in the first place, is to really ultimately have a better life for ourselves and for our family.